Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad an-Nabiy al-Ummi wa ala alihi wa sallim taslima. Amma ba'd. ولست أبالي حين أقتل مسلما على أي شك كان لله نصرائي. Respected brothers, elders, sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Those few words that we have recited just now, these are the words of one of the Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Probably the last words he had recited before he left this dunya. And these are some words that every single student of Deen, every single graduate today or yesterday or tomorrow, every person who does some khidmat of Deen should remember. And these are some words that should echo into our minds. These are some words we should even take with us to the graves. Now, before I explain these words, I would like to remind every single one of you of something that we already know. We recite it every single day. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Durud Sharif. Have we ever pondered on the words of Durud Sharif, where in the statement or in the dua, in the durud, we are making dua, we are asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send salat upon Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, just as he had sent salat upon Ibrahim and the family of Ibrahim. Why the family of Ibrahim? It is something we should think about as people of Deen. As ulama, as students of Deen, we should think about why the family of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. Why are we saying this in every single salat we make? We sit down in our salat. Before we complete our salat, we recite durud. And we make dua for the family of Ibrahim. The family of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam refers to Ismail alayhi salatu wasalam. Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam is commanded to place that blade on the throat of his son. What does that signify? It signifies a lifetime commitment. It signifies a commitment without any retreat. This is a reminder for us, the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, that we are also the ummah of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. When a person enters the door or the field of ilm, then it is a commitment, a mithaq, a promise you are given to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you can never ever take back. It's a commitment that you are making until your grave and beyond your grave. This is a commitment you are making for success fi darain, fi dunya wal akhirah. We remind ourselves of that. Sahaba radiyallahu anhum were the perfect examples of the reminder of our mithaq with Allah, reminding us the promise we gave to Allah. Khubayb bin Adi radiyallahu anhu, on the 4th year of Hijrah, he sent with a small group of Sahaba to educate some of the tribes outside of Medina Munawwara. While they were on their journey, subhanallah, they were ambushed. 7 or 10 Sahaba surrounded by 200 archers and many, many more. And most of the Sahaba, subhanallah, they are slaughtered, they are killed, ambushed. Only 3 of them survived till the end of the ambush. They were taken prisoners. Amongst them was Khubayb bin Adi. He's brought to Mecca. He's sold as a prisoner. And of course, he sold with the sole and the only intention to be publicly executed, subhanallah. Because he took part in Badr. By taking part in Badr, it means that he was responsible for the fall of many of the disbelievers in Badr. They want their revenge. On the day of his execution, subhanallah, he's taken outside of Mecca. He's placed on a stage. He's tied up on a plank of wood. Abu Sufyan, at that time not a Muslim, approaches him on the stage, begins to laugh at him, to spit at him. Now these are Sahaba we are speaking about, subhanallah. People who have given their lives for the deen of Allah. He's been spat upon, he's been laughed at. Abu Sufyan starts torturing him before he can speak to him. He cuts off his fingers, his ears, subhanallah. He laughs at him and he says, I'm sure that you would wish that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in your place and that you were safe in the hands of your family. Now the words of Khubayb radiyallahu anhu should mean something to every single one of us. What did he say? What did he say? Subhanallah. He says, Lastu ubali hina uqtalu musliman ala ayyi shakkin kana lillahi masra'i. He says, I have no care. As long as I am killed as a Muslim, whichever place, whichever part of the world, in whichever condition I am killed for the sake of Allah, it does not bother me, subhanallah. He says to Abu Sufyan, if it were true that I were to be exchanged and placed in the safety of my family, but then in exchange for that a thorn is to prick and to injure Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even then I would not choose that exchange. Subhanallah, what angers Abu Sufyan more than that? And the Sahaba who accepted Islam afterwards, who were present on that day, they were reporting this incident afterwards, and they said we could not count the amount of spears and swords that cut through his body at that time, subhanallah, and he was made shaheed. He was made shaheed, subhanallah. Companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam laid down this foundation for us. When we take this mithaq of the responsibility of deen, there's no retreat. There's no given anything less than 100%, subhanallah. Sa'd bin Rabi radiyallahu anhu, after the battle of Uhud, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is worrying about his companions. Ma fa'ala Sa'd bin Rabi, what has happened to Sa'd bin Rabi? He sends one of the Sahaba, please can you find him? Is he amongst the ahya? Is he amongst the living? Is he amongst the dead? The Sahaba, he goes, he does not find him amongst the injured. He searches the battlefield. In a corner of the battlefield, lying down alone, bleeding, subhanallah, that's Sa'd bin Rabi. With the last few breaths of his life, the companion finds him, puts the head of Sa'd bin Rabi on his lap. He says, the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam sent me to find you. Are you amongst the living or the dead? Sa'd bin Rabi says, please tell the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Ana min al-amwat, I am from the dead. And send my salam to the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Such a salam which is better than any salam that any follower of any Nabi had sent for his Nabi. Send that salam to my Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And then he says, and give a message to the Muslims, not just to the Ansar, not just to the Muhajirun, not just to the Sahaba, but to all the Muslims. Give this message to them, that no Muslim, none of you, none of the Ansar, none of you will have any excuse in the court of Allah if the disbelievers get an access to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and amongst you there is still the strength of a person who can blink an eye. He means if every single one of you has to fall before the disbelievers can lay a finger on Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then you have to fall, subhanallah. You have to give it 100% and even more than that, subhanallah. This is the deen of Allah. We have made a mithaq and a promise with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sahaba radiallahu anhum, this is what they laid down for us. This is the foundation of our deen. I remember our Ustad, Maulana Qasim Sima rahimahullah ta'ala, all of his students, he would drill one thing in our minds all the time. Ulama Rabbaniyun. He says he wants to produce such people who will do the khidmat of deen, just as Mufti Tawsir was mentioning before. He wants to produce such people who will be called ulama rabbaniyun. What are ulama rabbaniyun? These are seeds. Just as Mufti Saab said, the ulama are the warathatul anbiya. Warathatul anbiya means you will be a seed, a person who commits himself for the deen of Allah. You are like a seed. You take that seed and you plant it even in a barren portion of land, and subhanallah, you return a little while afterwards, there's a forest growing up there, subhanallah. MashaAllah, I'm sure Mufti Tawsir, his intention also would be the same intention of our Ustad Maulana Qasim Sima rahimahullah ta'ala, to produce such people that would be Rabbaniyun, such people who would take care of the ummah. Who will take care of the ummah. The preservation of this ummah is not in books, it's not in kitabs. The preservation of this ummah is an oral tradition, practicing the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, living the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then portraying and conveying the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ila al-akhirin. And inshallah ta'ala, I will just end with one hadith. Imam Abu Dawud rahimahullah ta'ala and Imam Ahmad in his Musnad, he mentioned this hadith where Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he says, the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam told the Sahaba, تَسْمَعُونَ وَيُسْمَعُ مِنْكُمْ وَيُسْمَعُ مِمَّا يَسْمَعُ مِنْكُمْ. Very short hadith, something for us to take home with us, inshallah ta'ala. تَسْمَعُونَ وَيُسْمَعُ مِنْكُمْ. You will hear from me. Sahaba, you will hear and you will learn from me. وَيُسْمَعُ مِنْكُمْ. And in turn, people will hear from you. So what does that mean? It means that the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam is telling the Sahaba, to learn this deen, you need to attach yourself. You need to attach yourself to a personality, to an ustad. There's no self-taught in this deen. We heard it last night, subhanallah. There's no self-taught in this deen. No one can teach themselves this deen. This deen has to be passed on from an institute to yourself, from a sheikh to yourself, from your ustad to yourself, from the ulama to yourself. Connect yourself with the ulama. Connect yourself with a sanad. Tasma'una wa yusma' minkum. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is saying to the Sahaba, you are hearing from me. A time will come, people will hear from you. Because he would not be around, but people will hear from you. وَيُسْمَعُ مِمَّا يَسْمَعُ مِنْكُمْ. And in turn, you would not be around, but people would learn the deen from those who learned it from you. This is a legacy of the Anbiya, and this is a legacy of the ulama. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept every single one of us to do some khidmat of deen, hatta al-maut wa ba'da al-maut, until death and even after death, inshallah ta'ala. This is a mithaq we should take with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a promise we should make with our Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we are ready to give every single thing for this deen, nothing less than 100% commitment, inshallah ta'ala. Jazakum Allah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sorry. 5 minutes again. Ya salam. Subhanallah. 5 minutes again. Subhanallah. Jazakum Allah khair. Where to begin? Subhanallah. You know, that's because he said 5 minutes. There's one narration that came to my mind. It might take a little bit more than 5 minutes, 6 minutes. Jazakumullah khair. Mazza bin Thawr as-Sadusi radiyallahu anhu. You know, mashallah, we speak about hadith, we speak about Sahaba. And many of us in the crowd who probably are not ulama may assume that, okay, commitment to deen is only for the ulama. But if you looked among the Sahaba, there were those who had so many different skills. Khalid bin Walid, he was not a hafiz of Quran. He himself said that the Quran was difficult for him to memorize. But every single one of us, we know about him because of his commitment to deen. He committed to deen in such a way that subhanallah, even the ulama could not commit themselves. When Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam was taking zakat, he ensured to highlight to the collector of zakat, collect everyone's zakat except the zakat of Khalid bin Walid. Why? Because he has given himself, he has given his wealth, he has given his horse, his sword, his shield, his armor, everything for the sake of the deen of Allah. So how can zakat be taken from him? He has nothing left to take from, subhanallah. Mazza bin Thawr as-Sadusi radiyallahu anhu was another Sahaba who was not a scholar of deen. But again, he gave every single thing. I will try to make it as concise as possible, insha'Allah ta'ala. Probably we have never heard of his name. Mazza bin Thawr. Mazza bin Thawr. Mazza bin Thawr as-Sadusi radiyallahu anhu. This name should stick in your minds. This was the time of the Futuhat. Abu Musa Ash'ari radiyallahu anhu was sent to Faris, to Persia, to bring the Persians into Islam, to remove the Persians' army from the face of the earth. They were standing in the face of the da'wah towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One conquest after the next, after the next, after the next. Umar bin Khattab sends a letter to Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. I have sent in your army one of my companions, one of the companions of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His name is Mazza bin Thawr. Take mashura from him. Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, who we know of, is being told by Umar bin Khattab, take mashura from Mazza bin Thawr. Who is this man? Who is this man? Subhanallah. There was this one general of the Persian armies, his name was Hurmuzan. Hurmuzan was a trickster. Every single time the Muslims would corner him or his army somewhere, he would slip out through the back and he would leave his army to face the Muslims to be defeated, and he would just slip away. And one after the next, the different cities and the different areas of Persia fell in the hands of the Muslims. That's Iraq today, subhanallah. Until one occasion, one incident, Hurmuzan entered a fortress by the name of Tustar in Persia, the last fortress, the last stronghold of the Persians to fall in the hands of the Muslims. And while the Muslims were besieging this fortress, there was a huge trench around the city. The Muslims couldn't conquer it, couldn't cross. For 18 months, 1 year and 6 months, the Muslims were surrounding the city. Could never make a footstep closer to the city, subhanallah. In Ramadan, Abu Musa al-Ash'ari and the Sahaba, they are making dua, they are begging Allah, send a help, or Allah send guidance. This is the last stronghold of the Persians. We not abandon it until it falls. While Abu Musa is in his tent, an arrow flies in his tent, subhanallah. An arrow straight in the ground in front of him. He looks at the arrow, he picks it up, he sees a small letter attached to the arrow. He reads the letter, he sees that this letter is from a person in the fort. The person is given a promise, I choose to be a slave amongst the Muslims than to be a king amongst my own people. He says that I have looked at your lifestyle and I will prefer to be with you than my own people. Hurmuzan has entered our fortress. He has made us slaves. He said to Abu Musa, if you give me your promise, of safety for myself and those who follow me, I would show you a way, a secret way to enter into Tustar. Abu Musa calls Madza bin Thawr. He shows him the letter. Abu Musa, he writes in the affirmative, I agree, subhanAllah, I agree. He sends the arrow back where it came from. Late in the evening, subhanAllah, from the darkness, a man comes. He enters the tent. Abu Musa is there, Madza bin Thawr is there. He tells Abu Musa, please send with me one man from your companions who must be very fit, very strong, who must also be very smart, and he must be a person who can be trusted. Madza says, O Abu Musa, ij'alni dhaka rajul, make me into that man, let me be that man. Madza bin Thawr was a leader of his tribe. He was such a person, when the challengers from the next army would come into the battlefield and they would say, Hal min Mubariz, is there anyone to challenge the hero of Persia? Madza would come out. He challenged 100 different heroes of Persia in that single battle, and he cut every single one of them down. He would fight with two swords, one in both hands, no shields. That was Madza bin Thawr. So he's telling Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, make me that man, let me be that man who would go with this person. So Abu Musa says, okay, go ahead, Bismillah. You are that person, you are that man. Madza follows the stranger in the darkness. He follows the stranger in the darkness. The stranger enters a tunnel in the back of the mountains behind some shrubs. Hidden tunnel. For the entire night, they would have to crawl on their stomach through that tunnel. Some places they would have to walk. Some places they would have to lie on their sides and then crawl. It took him the entire night. They would have to dive in a cave underneath a river. When he comes out the other side, he comes out behind the throne of Hormuzan in the middle of the city of Tustar. He remembers the entire way through the tunnel. There's no light, so he remembers it blindly, subhanAllah. He turns and he makes his way the reverse. He comes back out. He meets Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. He says, Abu Musa, send with me 300 of the best fighters amongst the Muslims. The top 300 Muslim warriors of that army were chosen. Abu Musa says to them, we are not capable of taking anything with us, not our armor, not our shields, no spears, only one sword. And it must be tied tightly to our bodies. 300 of the top Muslim fighters follow him into that dark tunnel. They make their way through that tunnel, to the underground river. When Madza comes out in the throne room of Hormuzan, and he takes a head count, from the 300 Sahaba, only 80 were left. 220 of them died, subhanAllah, just in the tunnel. With 80 followers, with 80 warriors, subhanAllah, they make takbirat, and Allah gives them the strength to conquer that entire city, subhanAllah. Subhanallah. Respected brothers, elders, sisters in Islam, these were the Sahaba. Allah in that battle, He gave Shahada to two great warriors. One was Madza bin Thawr, and the second one was Bara bin Malik, the brother of Anas bin Malik, radiyallahu anhum. They begged Allah for Shahada. They didn't ask Allah to survive or to have long life. They begged Allah, oh Allah, accept us to give us Shahada. We want to give our life for this deen. They were buried where they fell, subhanallah. Born in Medina and buried in Tustar. Sahaba, our foreparents, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us like them. May Allah even give us 1% of their talab, inshallah ta'ala. Ameen. Jazakumullahu khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ameen.